I don't know.
All right. So I've been watching Springsteen on Broadway on Netflix, which I did not realize was like Bruce Springsteen's 3-hour comedy special. He does a lot of like sitting at a piano and talking and telling stories. And I was wondering, like, could I do that? Like, how hard is that? To play like a simple little piano line while also talking. And I can confirm for you now, it's pretty hard. Anyway, I was reading this book recently, audiobook actually, called No Bad Parts. It's like this pop psychology book. It has a foreword written by Alanis Morissette, which is like your first red flag. And it's produced by a company that's called like Sounds True Media, which is second red flag. Anyway, the guy, this doctor, has this theory kind of about like multiplicity of self, and in a sort of like lightly cheeky way, he keeps suggesting like, oh, maybe we all have multiple personality disorder, you know? I mean, he doesn't really go that far. And maybe he should have, because like, this is the guy's idea, right? Is that we all have different parts of our brains. And these are distinct personalities inside our head. And we don't do enough to honor every different part of the multiplicity of ourselves. There's he has this term he calls exiles. They're like the parts of our brain that we have pushed out. But anyway, the problem you run into pretty quickly in this book, I only made it about 40 minutes in, is that he keeps talking about the parts, meaning the parts of your brain, but he just keeps saying parts. And there's this one section that I got to that I'm going to play now. And as soon as I listened to it, I was like, I'm out. I can't do this anymore.
I started listening inside myself, and I was shocked to find that I had parts too. In fact, some of mine were fairly extreme. So I started getting curious. I asked the clients to describe their parts, which they were able to do in great detail.
I am struggling to feel like I can accomplish anything today for some reason. So I'm going to record something for the podcast and, at least I'll have that. It's April 15th, and a QAnon brochure that I got in the mail a few weeks ago told me that the world was going to end today. I have to say, it is kind of charming that QAnon has already reached that phase, the end of the world brochure. And yet, they're not totally wrong, as COVID cases are predictably rising again. Maybe they won't go up that much this time. Maybe this really is just a last gasp of the virus. Or maybe it will be like this forever. Spikes and lulls in an endless pattern, new variants every few weeks, some worse than others. No vibe shift, not really, just a numb new normal. I've said before that it feels like we as a family, my family, we keep missing our window to interact with the outside world. Like we were all set to go to my nephew's birthday party a few weeks ago, which I was looking forward to for weeks, even before I could believe it was a real possibility. And then, when it was a real possibility, oh man. But then one of my nephews got sick, not COVID, something else, and we had to back it up for a while. I'm holding out hope that things will be clear enough on the rain date. How do you know when the coast is clear enough? When you know it's only a temporary window between spikes and variants? How do you feel where the bottom is? Other people do it. They get together, they have parties. Some of them get sick, but it doesn't feel like that many. How do you know what's an acceptable risk and what isn't? I don't know how. How do I still not know how?
We have recently started being a little more relaxed. We were more relaxed like at times, but due to my health, Sarah basically felt like we were taking a gamble every time we went out. It's been very strange for us. As this show approached, we were like, are we gonna do this? And we held off to the day of the show to buy the tickets because we were not certain that we were gonna pull it off. But we were thinking it's San Fermin at the press room in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. I really doubt it's going to be very busy, and we'll hopefully feel comfortable. So
Nice book ending too. Like I guess it probably wasn't the last concert you went to pre-pandemic, but it was the last one I went to.
it was. I know it's so weird. It was so weird that it was like right before it happened, and it was the last time when we went to see them together. We met Alan Tate ahead of the show.
Right, you and me. When we went to Concord, you're saying. Yeah.
Yes.
Back in the Halcyon days of 2019.
I'm going to go see him. I'm like, I text you ahead of time. You're like, say hi to Alice Ludwig Leon for me. And I'm like, oh no, baby, I'm looking for my second interaction with Alan Tate. We get to the show. No one is there when we get there, which I was stoked about. And we go and we sit at a table like 6 feet from where they're performing. They had tables all set up to spread people out. Before San Fermin came up, like the last time we saw them, they had them do like a little sound check where just one of them came out and kind of played their instrument. And the first person to come out was Alan Tate. And I'm like, oh, God damn, I love this guy so much. This guy is like the voice for me. This guy's incredible. So I'm staring really presumably creepy at him at a table that is, no joke, 12 feet from this guy. So I'm just like this, staring directly at him. And he catches my eye. And he's like, what's up, man? How's it going? And I'm like, it's good. I'm really good. And he goes, what? And I go, it's good. I'm really good. So Sarah's like, I think you creeped him out. We watched the show. The show was absolutely incredible. They're doing these, I think it was like 6 performances or something like that of this acoustic version of themselves where, and I think we actually got a better kind of like special version of the show because the press room has a grand piano. So Alice Ludwig Leon was on a grand piano. And I've seen pictures from the other shows and he's on one of those red Nord keyboards.
Yeah.
So I was like, we got like a lucky on this one.
Yeah.
After the show, Alice Ludwig Leon is at the merch table. And I'm like, oh my God, here we go. I'm gonna meet this dude. We wait our turn, it's kind of like all these people kind of crowded around. So we're like hanging back. We walk up and I'm like, thank you so much. This was incredible. I told him that he was the songwriter of our generation. So I say, hey man, I don't know if you guys are staying in Portsmouth tonight, because I knew the next show was Portland, Maine. So I was like, I don't know if you guys are staying the night, but I run a breakfast restaurant 2 doors down from this place. And if you were interested, you should come in. If you guys aren't pressed for time, you should come in. The girl who had just bought merch next to me is like, oh man, you want to go to Colby's? And he's like, oh yeah, cool. Like Friday happens, we're all hungover at in the kitchen. It starts to get busy, and I'm like, oh boy, like Jeremy's not in the best mood, and I'm like, great, like they're gonna come in, they're gonna get told it's gonna be a 45-minute wait, and they're not gonna stay, and it's gonna be really uncomfortable and weird. So I'm like, boy, this is just terrible. So then, like a window passes where it's like 11 o'clock, and I'm like, okay, well they aren't going to come in. That's probably a good thing because this is
you've gone through the whole arc of this was a good idea, exactly. This was a bad idea. Okay, yeah.
And inviting anyone to the restaurant is a bad idea because it's an extremely busy restaurant, and it's like I'm not going to be able to, whatever. It just seems like a weird thing to do because it's like I'm in the kitchen, yada yada. About 11:30, Claire walks in, and I'm like, holy crap. And following her is all of San Fermin. And I'm like, San Fermin is in the restaurant. They walk in, Jeremy is talking to them and is like, it's gonna be like a half an hour. And they're like, okay. And I'm like, oh my God, they're gonna fucking stay. So they disappear for a little bit. And very quickly they are sat. Within a couple of minutes, Ellis Ludwig Leone is in my fucking window talking to me. He's like standing there and he's like, hey man. And I'm like, hey, what's up? And he's like, thank you so much for inviting us. And I was like, thanks for coming. Like this.
Yeah, that's
crazy.
awesome. Yeah.
And he's like, I ordered the thing with everything. Like, it's like, you know, like, and we're like talking about the food. I'm like, yeah, man, like, no, you know, like, thank you so much for coming, whatever. He goes to sit back down at the table. A couple minutes later, Alan Tate walks up, talks to me for a second, and everyone's walking up to me and they're like, it's like you guys are old friends with this band. And I'm like, I know. It's like I'm old friends with them. One thing that I love about Jeremy is like as much as he is like, oh yeah, you know, oh, they're a famous band or something like that, he's very like he'll take care of them. Like I said, he bought Kurt Weill breakfast that morning and said it was on the kitchen.
Yeah.
So Jeremy comes up to me and he goes, if you wanted to make it out to the table, I heard them being like, it's so good. And I was like, yes. So I walk out to the table and I'm like, how is everything? And they sit there and rave about the food. Ellis Ludwig Leone is like, this is like, he points down to his cinnamon swirl French toast and he's like, this is like the greatest thing I've ever eaten. And I'm like,
I mean, it is good.
I'm like, oh my God. And I'm standing there and I'm talking to Claire Wellen, who I'm like, I think is so gorgeous and like her voice is so incredible. And then I'm like talking to her, which is weird. So I'm like, you know, we had such an amazing time at the show last night. Sarah kept raving about like it being probably one of the best live performances she had ever seen. And they were like, whoa, really? And I was like, yeah, you guys are incredible. And so they talked about their food. And Ellis Ludwig Leone is like, you know, one of the things with being on tour is that like all the cities kind of blend together. And he was like, it's when you're able to do stuff like this, like go and do like the local thing that like really makes a memory for you. And I was like, thank you so much.
Right on, man.
They're incredibly nice and they left and I'm friends with San Fermin now.
I love it.
I was like, man, if they play Portsmouth again, I'm going to get them to come into the restaurant again.
They're going to be regulars. Yeah.
I'm going to go and see them and be like, okay, I'm going to see you at breakfast tomorrow, right? Like,
yeah, I love that.
There it is. There's the San Fermin story. All right. I love you.
It's
your birthday
too.
Tomorrow. I'm going to drop a gift off at some point out at your house.
Okay, cool. We'll be at the Children's Museum in Dover in the morning.
Happy birthday, Dada. Happy birthday. Happy
A couple weeks ago on the show, I talked about how some really odd songs, like Wigwam's 2011 Swedish hair metal throwback, Do You Want to Taste It? Were functioning as emotional support songs for me during the difficult year that I'm having. A year that is somehow harder for me than the last two. Songs have always been emotional support mechanisms for me, but I guess something struck me about lingering issues indicated by a longer chain of association. I've been listening to a lot of songs from shows and movies that I like second order escapism, like I've retreated deeper inside myself and I need a longer rope to stay connected. But anyway, whatever the reason, a new emotional support song has entered the fray in a very big way, and it's called Dr. 11 by Dan Romer. It's from the HBO series Station 11. Station 11 is, and I don't want to sound hyperbolic here, but It's the most staggering and beautiful TV show I've ever seen. It absolutely rocked me. It is a post-apocalyptic show about a pandemic that kills most of the population of the Earth, which might sound like something you have absolutely no desire to see, but please know that the series is just enthralled by art and the interpretation of art, everything from Shakespeare to A Tribe Called Quest. And it's about the way that art provides tools of expression that we couldn't find any other way. But it's also just about how much we can do in general. The show was created by the novelist Patrick Somerville, who comes from what the guys on The Ringer refer to as the Damon Lindelof coaching tree. And when I think about Damon Lindelof, I mostly think about his Watchmen adaptation, which is another of the greatest TV shows I've ever seen. And the final episode of Watchmen, it's called See How They Fly. And for some reason, that title has always made me feel really good. I guess because I love thinking about unlimited potential. See How They Fly. There's a lot of that in Station 11. The last 2 episodes made me literally sob with joy, and I don't see how anything will ever beat it. But even if that weren't true, Dan Romer's song would be incredibly beautiful. Just listen to it for a minute here. I knew I was going to love the show Station 11 in the first episode, which, by the way, is the only one that is really pandemic-y. I just want to tell you about 2 things that happen in it. In the first scene, there is a character played by Himesh Patel, who is so good that he even made that movie about where people forget the Beatles pretty good. His character, Jeevan, is watching a play, and another character on stage goes into cardiac arrest. He's playing King Lear, so the audience isn't sure if it's just part of his interpretation or what, but Jeevan senses that something is wrong, and he stands up and walks right toward and then right onto the stage, literally stepping over seats. When he gets to the actor and tries to help him, someone asks if he's a doctor. At this point, we don't know. He might be. We just met him. But he says no. He actually clearly has no idea what to do. He just felt like he had to do something. It's a little moment that tells you everything you need to know about Jeevan. He's a person who feels compelled to help. And I really got that. I learned later that the book that the show is based on, Jeevan is actually an EMT in training, which makes his march to the stage more logical. But in the show, he's not. He's just a guy. And there is something so beautiful about that choice in adaptation. In another scene, Jeevan's sister, who actually is a doctor, and another few doctors or nurses, they are at an overwhelmed hospital. And they exit briefly through a side door, and they find just a huge crowd of people outside trying to get in. It is a horrifying sight, and a man approaches with his daughter in his arms. And one of the nurses takes a breath and heads straight for the guy, through the crowd of sick people, and starts directing him where to go. It is another tiny moment about human kindness and self-sacrifice and goodness, and Station 11 gives you that over and over and over again in shocking and beautiful moments for 10 hours. You really gotta watch this show.
I'll start off with a good distracting question for you, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Which is, I've been thinking about this. How do you know when you're listening to an audiobook if the writing is bad?
The same. I don't know. Same way as when you're reading a book. Like,
I think it's harder. I don't know. Maybe it's not for you, but it's harder for me to tell.
Okay. As a fundamental thing, we have to decide what good writing is. Like, are we talking about like the quality of the prose in terms of like, I don't know, alliteration and punctuation, or are we talking about plot, or?
Yeah, I think it's sort of both. It is sort of both. I guess I was thinking about that more micro level. Like I was thinking more about sentence structure and like, so you'd mentioned that you were like realizing you really liked science fiction, and I actually kind of had a similar realization. But especially like what I would think of as sort of like emo sci-fi, like the stories that are sort of mostly about feelings, but have these kind of like, fantastical backdrops. Like George Saunders is like a really good example.
That's what the good sci-fi is. Emotional stuff with science background. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Although I definitely find that I don't really care that much about the science being very sound, like I just watched Station 11, which I just absolutely adored. And there was some like nitpicking stuff about like some of the, not time travel, but like the time spanning mechanics of it. And I was like, oh, I don't care about any of that. Like,
yeah,
as long as it emotionally makes sense to me in the moment, I don't care if the science checks out.
Yeah. Let's leave the micro dissection of every single piece of media content to like Screen Rant and Cinema Sins.
Yeah, exactly.
I feel like with the audiobooks and good writing, like as a person who writes for a living, not in like a cigarette in hand, coffee in a Paris cafe type of way, but in like a boring corporate copywriting type of way, still, like, in order to check whether what you wrote sounds okay, you have to read it out loud.
Yes, for sure. That's true.
So it kind of translates. Like, if it's written well, the audiobook will sound good. And if it's clunky, it'll sound clunky. And if it's really
there
good,
there are some readers though who can almost carry it off somehow, who can almost disguise the fact that it's not very good. In the same way, there are actors that can disguise bad writing.
There's a limit to it, though.
Yeah, no, you're right.
Yeah,
I was listening to this book, it was a science fiction audiobook that was recommended as being like Station 11. And it's so funny because I think the world building was just not so good. It was like a post-apocalyptic, most of the world's been flooded, like a water world kind of story. And they kept talking about these raiders, which was like pirates. And I was hearing the word raiders so many times in a row that I was like, if I hear raiders another 6 times in the next minute, I think I'm going to turn this audiobook off. And I ended up having to.
Yeah. I think with like, especially in science fiction, when it comes to like weird names of things, I don't know, spaceships or people or species of some kind, I feel like science fiction is at a disadvantage because as an audiobook, because hearing it 5,000 times can get annoying, but when you're reading it, you can kind of skip over because you see the jumble of letters, you know what it means. You don't actually have to like voice it in your head.
Right.
And I think for science fiction, it's actually better.
Yeah, there's no like understood synonyms for made up words and terms.
Yeah.
So unless you want to be unless you want to be an intentionally sort of difficult writer and just build those out into your world, like, which I do think helps a lot of the time, but I know some people don't have the patience for it. Yeah. Some people don't have the patience to read a book where they're not going to understand what's happening for the first 110 pages.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I love to torture myself with stuff like that. So, as a person who's still trying to maybe potentially finish Infinite Jest, I'm not that type of person. I power through stuff. Unless it's objectively morally bad, or like the type of self-help book that just says you have to work harder and play the capitalism game to win. Like then I quit. Yeah. But when it's just
I wouldn't even start that book in the first place. Hopefully,
sometimes they catch you unaware. Sometimes they start off with like a good premise, and then you're like, oh, you're just trying to recruit me into your MLM or something.
Yeah, I bail on arguably too much stuff. I will jump ship, like instantly and flit to something else. Sometimes I'll come back to it, but there's probably a lot of good stuff that I have left unread, unwatched, whatever.
I think that's healthy because life is too short for a bad book.
A couple of weeks ago, I read this book, Trick Mirror, by Gia Tolentino. It was great. Nothing really beats a well-written essay collection. And I immediately identified with the author, who writes in her preface that telling herself a story about something is her primary tool for understanding the world. Me too. And that she was beginning to doubt how true her beliefs were, knowing that they were built on narratives that she self-constructed. Me too. That's the suggestion behind the title of the book. When I look and talk about the world, am I accurately reflecting it, or am I deceiving myself and everyone else by creating these narratives? It's uncomfortable to think about, particularly for someone like me. And it's probably no wonder that after finishing that book, I started listening to a bunch of podcasts created by a sports guy. Bill Simmons has this sports and culture podcast network called The Ringer. And over the years, he's hired some of my favorite writers and podcasters, most recently Joanna Robinson. He's also got Andy Greenwald, whose writing I used to read in Spin magazine when I was 15, and whose opinions on culture unsurprisingly align very strongly with mine now. I came across The Ringer's podcast because I was looking for material about what else, Station 11, but I stayed for their skill at crafting narratives and meta-narratives about TV and movies. For the last couple weeks, I've listened exclusively to 5 or 6 of their shows, reverting back to podcasts pretty hard after my audiobook phase. Apologies to Cassie David, whose book I abandoned over on Hoopla. Now, I don't listen to The Ringer's sports-focused shows, but in a way, they are all sports shows, because sports people are, by and large, narrative people. Like, my own eventual transformation into a baseball guy or a basketball guy is basically inevitable, and that's because I love a great story, and great stories are the lifeblood of professional sports. Mark your calendars, it's going to happen sooner or later. The guys on The Ringer's TV podcast, they root for someone like Bill Hader the same way they'd root for LeBron James, a master of his craft at the peak of his excellence. The latest season of Barry is a home run, it's true. And the bases were loaded at the bottom of the 9th for Top Gun Maverick, and Tom Cruise pointed way out at the cheap seats, and he fucking did it. Yes, if you're wondering, I did have to Google whether or not the top or the bottom of the inning was the end. I don't know, I guess I was just thinking about how, at least for me, books and audiobooks present more of a challenge than podcasts, which I mostly use like junk food. I can see how my retreat into the Ringerverse was probably a product of the self-doubt introduced into me by Gia Tolentino, alongside my well-documented general 2022 malaise. Like right now, I just have a very limited capacity for being challenged, which I don't like. I don't like the feeling of retreat, but I cannot like something and still continue down its path.
And you mentioned not being like a writer smoking a cigarette in a Parisian cafe, but I would say to that, I was going to say, just wait, man, because who knows what happens in like post-war periods. That's peak cafe cigarette smoking writing time.
I feel like it depends. Yeah. I feel like peak cafe smoking writing time is maybe in the midst of it, but you've really got to be in there. Because like, what's his name? Erich Maria Remarque. I'm not sure how you pronounce that in English. But he's this German writer that lived in Paris for a while. He was writing a bunch of his stuff like in the middle of the whole thing of the World War. And a lot of people found it weird that he was writing when there's a war going on. But now, as I'm in that position, I get it now. Like, because what else are you going to do? You're going to go to a cafe, if you can, and try to live life. Love.
Yeah, so that was my question for you, is like, what is happening right now? Like, how much of things are still going on? Are you still like working? Is it still like business as usual in some ways?
It really depends. Like I knew this question was going to come up, so I was kind of trying to prepare a mental answer for it. And like it's not a metaphor because it really happened, but in the context of this war, it is a metaphor. When the Revolution of Dignity was happening, or like Euromaidan, whatever you call it, in 2014, I was right there in the midst of it. Like there's a video somewhere on my Instagram where I'm like, I don't know, maybe 20 meters away from like the contact line between the revolutionaries and like the police that were throwing smoke grenades. And like I inhaled some of that gas. Like I was close enough to where I got some of it on me. And it still felt surreal. And I took that video, I yelled a bunch of slurs at the police people, and then my lunch break was over, and I went 2 blocks away from there, and then just sat at my office computer and continued my copywriting job. And it's kind of the same way now. Like, if you're not in immediate danger, you just kind of do what you usually do, except you're more stressed because there's always the background hum of, hey, there's a war. So in many ways, it is still business as usual, but in more ways, it's not.
So here's some good news. I finally got an almost normal month of life in May 2022 for the first time since the pandemic started. And I've done things here and there, seen people, but it was mostly through work or under an absolute haze of COVID anxiety. But in May, it was almost normal pretty often. We had dinner at our house with my friend Dave and his girlfriend Jenny. I always want to say new girlfriend, but they've been together for over 2 years. I got to host a little event at the New Hampshire Theater Project, which is something I've wanted to do since I walked in the doors the first time. I recorded an Arcade Fire podcast in person with Morgan. We had a couple of garage jam sessions too. And then we actually got to have that birthday party for my nephews. More than a month after both of their birthdays, but who cares? We got to do it. Everybody was healthy for the right window, and my boys and my sister's boys got to play in surprising harmony for the first time since Arlo turned 2. I found it all to be wildly restorative and almost ridiculously centering. And then, my Uncle Jeremy got mysteriously sick, which put Morgan and then me in a direct chain of contamination. I wore an N95 mask around my house for a couple of days and luckily never developed any symptoms. Neither did Morgan, and Jeremy never tested positive, so it was probably something else, but still, it felt like a shot across the bow. So, we shut things down again. That's where we're at right now, for a while. But it feels more likely now that we'll come back out again. It feels more likely than ever that we'll find some kind of balance and a greater level of contentedness. I have so much in my life to be thankful for, so much that is so easy, and what I need is almost embarrassingly simple. It's just seeing people, different people, sometimes in different places. That's all I need. But God, I need it so much.